Good afternoon. My name is Hethel Chawla. I'm the Wellness Coordinator at the Supreme Court, also the former chair of the Lawyer Wellness Committee at the Virginia Bar Association, and the current member of the Lawyer Development Council of the VBA. And it is my absolute honor to be introducing our speaker today, Dr. Kelly Crace, who is the Executive Director of the Contemplative Sciences Center at the University of Virginia. So I first had the privilege of meeting Dr. Crace when I heard him speak at William and Mary Law School a few years ago. And at that time, he previously served as the Associate Vice President for Health and Wellness and was the Director of the Center for Mindfulness and Authentic Excellence at the William and Mary Law School. But since I first heard him speak, I, along with my colleagues at VJ Lab, have been taking every opportunity we can to continue to have him present. And, due to his wealth of knowledge and perspective that he brings on holistic well-being, I think we just can't get enough of having him present. Dr. Crace is a licensed psychologist. He's an author on authentic excellence, flourishing and resilience in a relentless world, and the Life Values Inventory, which is a tool designed to help individuals and organizations clarify their values. I encourage you all to read his formal bio. For time purposes, I'm not even scratching the surface of his accomplishments, but all I have to say is he's done over 3,000 presentations, and so I encourage you to read more about him. We often, in our busy professions, don't even take the time to think about what our values are, what is our purpose, and whether how we spend our time each day aligns with that values and purpose. And that is very important for fulfillment, both professionally and personally. So today we're going to learn more about authentic excellence and what that really means towards helping us navigate towards a purpose-driven performance. So on that note, Dr. Crace, I am going to pass it to you. And if you have questions, please feel free to include them in the chat and we'll be sure to address them. Thank you so much. And I give you Dr. Crace.
Thank you, Hethel. I appreciate so much that very kind introduction. I am so admiring of your work. You do needle moving work in terms of being able to take a very stressful profession and help us bring our sense of wellness forward. I want to express my appreciation to you, Hethel, and to Charlene and to Sunny with the Virginia Bar Association. And also want to give a shout out to Laura Grace Brown, who's with the Virginia Bar Association, who is also a dear colleague from William and Mary. It's such a pleasure to spend some time with all of you this afternoon. I wish it could be in person, but this is the next best thing. I'll be honest with you, I bring no wisdom to this conversation, but I bring a lot of gratitude. I am so grateful for all that you do in your profession to promote the justice and the advocacy and the safety and well-being of our citizens as well as our society. It is such a heavy lift and it's such a relentless lift. It's such a noble profession, and yet it's a profession that carries with it a lot of stress. Because you are so critical to the well-being of our society, it's also important for you to be well and healthy in that process. That's a tall order these days. And so my life's work as a psychologist for the past 35 years, it's over 35 years now, has really been devoted to trying to understand the psychology of flourishing through important life transitions and through difficulties. So transitions that are both planned in our life and we see them on the horizon and are preparing for them, as well as transitions that we find ourselves in, reactive transitions that we didn't plan and may even be unwanted, but we are in them. How do we flourish through difficult transitions? We started this over 35 years ago, working with a population of elite athletes and performing artists that had undergone career-ending injuries, a time of profound lostness for them. And we were interested in knowing what did those individuals that flourished through that very difficult transition and what did people do that languished? And then we expanded that research over the past 3 decades to include multiple cultures, multiple societies, multiple generations across the entire lifespan of transitions. including the entire continuum of neurodiversity. So we weren't looking for a type of brain that flourishes. We were with whatever brain we bring, both with what gift and challenges our brain brings to our world. What do we focus on, and what is our intentionality and our attention when we're able to flourish through hardship? And so, what I would like to do is share with you a little bit some of the things that we learned from working with lovely individuals such as yourselves. And one of the things that surprised us is that in our work, we found that there's no natural born flourishers. People that flourish work at it, they're very intentional about it. And the reason they're intentional is because, one, our world doesn't foster it. Our world will drift us away from flourishing, as well as our own brain will drift us away from flourishing. So we must constantly kind of bring our focus back to the things that promote flourishing. Um, we also learned that some of the platitudes that we're taught that lead to flourishing actually don't. They actually get in the way. Let me give you two examples, if you don't mind. One, how many times have we heard, and especially when we think about the wellness challenge of this week, and so admire the leadership of the Virginia Bar Association to bring forward and VJ Lap to bring forward well-being as an area of focus this entire week. And so I'm so appreciative of that. But how often do we hear the importance of, for us to be healthy and well and to flourish, we must strive for work-life balance? We hear that almost every day, the importance of work-life balance. And we actually found in our research that striving for work-life balance doesn't lead to flourishing. It actually can promote languishing. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is there's a connotation about the term work-life balance that kind of connotes that our work is not an important part of our life, when we all know that it is. In fact, for many of us, it's an important part of our sense of purpose and meaning. And this kind of connotes to separate that out in some way. Secondly, we find that when people strive for work-life balance, they actually end up at the end of the day, usually in some kind of critical judgment along the lines of being upset with themselves for failing to balance, or being upset with the world around them for not allowing them to balance. We found instead that people that flourished strived for something different. They strive for work-life harmony. And what work-life harmony means, um, and I want to make sure, Hethel and Sunny, can you hear me okay? I see in the chat that somebody's having trouble hearing me. Is my audio okay?
I can hear you totally fine.
Okay,
Yes, I
thank you. I
can
just
as
wanted
well.
to check. Thank you so much. So, what we find is striving for work-life harmony means kind of starting every day with what is the right devotion of time, of my time and energy with what matters to me. And some days it may be 90% this and 5% this and 5% that. But they ask that question every day as if they've never asked it before, and they allow the answer to be different. And that was what we found seems to promote a perceived sense of balance. And so they experience more balance by focusing more on harmony. We're going to talk about that a little more near the end of our session today. The other platitude that was surprising to us, and may not be surprising to you, but striving for happiness, the importance of striving for happiness actually doesn't lead to flourishing. Because what we found is people become so emotionally sensitized to how they are feeling right now that they become like, if I am happy, how do I hold happy? If I'm not happy, how do I find happiness? And they become so emotionally sensitized to an emotional state that can be affected by 100 different variables, including how much water I have in my system right now. We found that people that flourish, especially through important life transition, they tend to strive for meaning instead of happiness. Interestingly enough, the more you strive for meaning, the more you have experiences of happiness. So it turned out that it's happiness and balance by consequence rather than by intention. We also found that this term flourishing has become so overused and so distorted in today's time. It's been my life's work, and I'm even tired of the term because of how it's been distorted and overused. Flourishing today can often take the connotation of I'm just doing great in everything and happy and not affected by the world around me. That's not what we mean by flourishing. When we're looking at flourishing, we're focusing more on, while affected by the world around me, how do we healthfully engage in the things that matter to us? So we were actually looking, we operationalized, in our research, we operationalized flourishing by three things: a consistent level of productivity, in the things that matter to us, a consistent level of fulfillment. So you were feeling the fulfillment of this engagement, and a consistent level of resilience through the hardness and harshness and sometimes unfairness of the world around that work. And when we were measuring productivity, we weren't looking at kind of the westernized version of achievement. We found that across cultures, people want to feel effective in the things that matter to them. So in collectivist cultures, what mattered to them in being effective would be effectiveness in caring for others, effectiveness in a sense of community. In individualistic societies, it may be effectiveness toward the goals of things that I have for things that matter to me. And so we were looking at this deeper level of effectiveness and fulfillment and resilience. And what we found is there's no natural born flourishers, and they're very intentional about it. But when we studied it more, we became surprised by the fact that we learned that values have an incredibly important part to play in flourishing, but they also have an incredibly important part to play in our vulnerability. So, what I'm going to ask of you is if you will be patient with me for just a few minutes to allow me to geek out and kind of share with you what we learned in our research. I've not earned your trust. And so I want to share with you, how did we learn what we learned? And then we're going to focus on, what do you do about it? I especially going to want to focus on a particular thing that was a particular part of our study. There were 4 years in this 3 decades of research. There were 4 years where we focused specifically on organizations that were in burnout conditions. So organizations that were in a lot of intensity, high turnover, high burnout rate, high quit rate, because they were in this constant state of chronic too-muchness, just dealing with chronic too-muchness and at times absurdity. And yet, what did people do that in burnout conditions flourished? What did people do that moved from intensity to vitality while the conditions around them didn't change? And so what we found when we were looking at these people that flourished through chronic too-muchness, through absurdity, is it didn't make their life easier, and it didn't change the situation around them, but it absolutely changed how they managed it and how they experienced it. And so I want to share those strategies that we learned from that research. But first, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see that okay. Hethel and Sunny, are we okay on that?
Looks great.
Great, thank you. So first, before we get started, I want to just briefly share with you my home. It's behind me right here. I'm looking over a beautiful Dell Pond, but this is the Contemplative Sciences Center where I work. And the mission of our Contemplative Sciences Center at the University of Virginia is to advance and deepen flourishing through both research and practice. And so you're always welcome. I invite you to come and visit me. We're expanding our programs and events. We just opened up this past full year, and we're getting ready to expand programs and events for all community members, including professional retreats, to be able to take this work deeper. So I would love for you to come and visit and share your wisdom with me. What I want to share with you briefly about our research is, when we started this over 35 years ago, we went on this basic assumption because the previous research had indicated that values played a very important part in flourishing, especially during important life transitions, because it made sense, because the more I focus on what's important to me, I should be motivated. And if I'm motivated, I'll act. So it made sense that, okay, the more I focus on what matters to me, the more effective I'll be. Actually, what it turned out to look like was this. Because we learned that the more you focus on what's important to you, what actually happens are conflicting motivations and conflicting actions. We learned that the only shot you have at flourishing is to be value-centered, but that when we become value-centered, we as human beings start to experience certain thoughts and patterns of thinking that we as human beings don't naturally manage well. And then it starts to get in our way. It starts to affect our ability to flourish. So we became fascinated with trying to understand this inverted U. Why does this happen? And what we learned is it's essentially around the psychology of caring. It's essentially around what happens to our brain once something or someone becomes important to us. Once you decide that something matters to you or someone matters to you, there are three unavoidable truths that you can't escape. The first is uncertainty. The truth is, you never completely control what goes into something that matters to you. There's always a chance you could fail or lose that thing or person of importance. And if you did fail or lose that thing or person of importance, you would pay a cost. You would hurt in some way. Think about that. If I can't dismiss the importance of that and I lose it or fail at it, you would experience that as a cost, as a hurt. We also are aware in today's time that anytime you engage in something that matters to you, we're aware that people are watching us. And they're not watching us neutrally. They are watching us with an eye of evaluation. And what we think they might be thinking may be accurate or may not be accurate. But if you dare to care, you can't avoid these three things. And when these three things get activated, this is the result. It's the what if that comes into my mind. The moment that I decide that Sonny and Hethel are very important to me, my next thought will be, what if I lose Hethel or Sonny? And so it's the what if I fail at this thing that matters to me? What if I lose this person of importance? What if I make a decision and find out 5 years later that it was the wrong decision, but I've gone down that path too far? What if I miss out? So what started with this thing that matters to us has now become eclipsed with the thoughts of what if. And people didn't describe feeling afraid. What they described feeling was pressure, psychological pressure, which is fine. It's stressful, it's pressure. But if you allow your brain to naturally respond to that value-centered pressure, we tend to go in one of two ways. We tend to either over-control and master or avoid and escape until it has to be done. We learn that perfectionism and procrastination are the neurologically natural ways we cope with value-centered pressure. Why? Because it works. This is actually called the fear-based model of excellence because you actually attain excellence doing this. I want to back up too, and I want to invite Sonny and Hethel, please always, as you manage the chats and question and answers, I want to be sure and invite you to feel free to interrupt the conversation at any point in time if you feel like there's a question or a comment or a wisdom that you think would be important for everyone to hear. So I just want to make sure for you to feel comfortable doing that. So as we look at this fear-based model of excellence, we can understand why. Think about it. If I can control everything and do it perfectly, I don't have to worry about failing. And if I could sidestep this pressure until it has to be done, when it has to be done, doesn't matter if I'm afraid. And so it actually kicks our brain into kind of a different gear of motivation and focus. That's why a lot of people say, I wait till the last minute because I work better under pressure. You actually don't. But what you're feeling is that extra gear of motivation and focus. Here's the issue, though. This fear-based model of excellence, which is what we are taught because it's how we're neurologically wired, this fear-based model of excellence eventually hits a ceiling effect and an increasing cost. We start to see that I start to realize that I just can't control everything the way that I used to. I just can't do everything perfectly, or I just can't pull it off at the last minute at the quality that I used to be able to, or I just can't stay up 3 nights in a row the way that I used to be able to. But so we experience the ceiling effect on our effectiveness, and we experience an increasing cost. And sadly, when we start experiencing the pushback of this model is usually around the time when the stakes are becoming higher and higher. Interestingly enough, the generation of young adults today, between the ages of 17 and 29, have the highest incidence of this fear of failure than any other previous generation because of something wonderful and wise about them. They no longer want to succeed. They want to succeed in something that means something to them, something that matters to them. But the perceived competition for those meaningful opportunities has never been more fierce, never more fierce. So importance is higher, uncertainty is higher, and therefore fear is higher. And they have known this pressure since middle school because they're a part of the portfolio generation. That this leads to this, this opportunity. of a linear expectation. And then, as all of us know, we live nonlinear lives. And so they will often come into their 20s, whether it's into the university or community college or the adult working environment or the military, having been experts at controlling and avoiding their way to excellence. And it's in the 20s and the 30s where this starts to push back. Well, let's think about why. Why does this get in the way? Well, think about it this way. Perfectionism is characterized by long periods of intensity and short periods of relief, and the emotional residue is chronic worry because you constantly have to worry about everything you got to control. Procrastination is long periods of relief and short periods of intensity, and the emotional residue is chronic worry because you're chronic guilt because you feel guilty about waiting until the last minute. How many of us have ever been up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a project that's due the next day? We're hyper stressed about it, and we just tell ourselves, I am not doing this again. I'm not putting myself through this again. This is the last time. And then find ourselves 3 weeks later saying the same thing in the same kind of situation. It's just a human thing. This is how we're wired. But what happens with this is when this starts pushing against us, and we start to see that this model is starting to work against us, if we don't have another way to go, then the only place I have to go is to back up to the top and care less into depressive apathy. Because if I care less, I'll be less afraid. This is called the triangle of languishing, to where we just control and avoid or care less with apathy for the pursuit of calm. So what started out to be the pursuit of meaning and effectiveness is now the desperate chase for calm through either control or avoidance or apathy. And the reason why this gets in the way is whenever we start leading with fear, with the what if, when that starts to lead, we move into a need state. And what we're needing is reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And this is amplified during important life transitions, because what you're leaving is something of certainty and heading to something of uncertainty. And I don't know how it's going to work out. And I need for this to work out. And so we look for that reassurance by becoming very dependent on the outcomes of the day, which causes our brain to start keeping score. And we develop this chronically evaluative mindset that's focused on how did it go today? How about today compared to yesterday? How about today compared to me, compared to you? It becomes comparative. It becomes competitive, and actually has become one of the most significant predictors of insomnia today, a chronically evaluative mindset. It plays out like when I rest my body at the end of the day, my mind turns on and replays the day. And it never replays that day neutrally. It always punctuates that replay, usually in some kind of critical judgment, usually along the lines of, what didn't get done today and what do I need to do tomorrow to make up for it? And then we develop this perfectionistic plan for tomorrow to make up for it, and we wake up with anxiety. I say this not to depress the hell out of you. This is just human. This is what we do. But what did people do that disrupted this model? The one thing that I want to leave with you too, that is a tragedy about this very normal model, because what happens is, what we've learned in this is across cultures is we do a good job in cultures of teaching people how to care. We just don't teach them how to hold the fear associated with caring. We learn that there's this dynamic relationship between values and fear. I can't care about anything without being immediately reminded of the uncertainty of it. And I can't be scared of anything I don't care about. So to care is to fear. And yet, if we don't teach people how to hold the fear associated with caring in a healthy way, then the fear-based model of excellence plays out. And we move into just over control or avoidance. And that starts to play out and get in the way. And sadly, the fear-based model of excellence is the fuel that stokes stress glorification culture, imposter syndrome, and protective egocentrism. Stress glorification culture is this kind of notion that is happening right now in our world, where when we move into work environments or graduate school environments or high performance environments, we're coming from our community being noted for our talent and intelligence, and we walk into this environment and everybody's talented and intelligent. I go to law school and everybody's talented and intelligent. I go into practicing law and everybody's talented and intelligent. So the only way we can find distinction is through our effort. And then what happens is now the definition of success starts to become the misery index, to where how hard we're working is our badge of honor. To where I stayed up 2 nights, well, I stayed up 3. I've got 4 projects, well, I've got 5. It becomes this one-upping to where we're glorifying stress as the marker of our success. And the fear-based model of excellence is what stokes that. And if we're needing reassurance that we're going to be okay by looking for the outcomes for that reassurance, which I don't completely control, then I'm always going to be in a state of insecurity. So I may have 1,000 points of data that tells me that I'm enough, but it's the next project around the corner that's going to show me and reveal me for the idiot that I really am. And if I'm constantly overwhelmed by the stress of this stress glorification culture and the insecurity of the imposter syndrome, if I'm constantly overwhelmed by that, then I become very protective, trying to manage myself, which keeps me from tuning into you and makes it difficult for me to tune in with empathy and compassion and work because I'm so overwhelmed myself. So I want to ask you something. I want you to reflect on something. By the way, if you don't mind, at some point in time, I want you to make sure that you have something to write on, some paper or your phone or whatever, and something to write with, because I'm going to take you through a couple of exercises, but something for you to write on. By the way, these slides will be made available to all of you. I'm going to make sure I share these slides with Sunny and Hethel for them to share. Question. When you first saw this fear-based model of excellence, what first came to mind and who came to mind? Did anybody come to mind when you saw this? Was it you? Was it a partner? Was it a friend, a sibling, a family member? Did you see both sides? Oh, this person that I know is kind of on this perfectionistic side, and this person over here is on the avoidance side. Do you see yourself in both sides? Because we do both. And we actually found that it's often life role separated. Like we had certain people that were perfectionistic and very controlling in their professional life and avoidant in relationships, or vice versa. So we found that there was oftentimes distinction across life roles. Not always, but sometimes. But what first came to mind when you saw this? What first came to mind? And who came to mind? And I just want you to reflect on that for a second. I so loved, we did this workshop one time for all the first year, all the 1Ls at William and Mary. And it was during a time where it was a really difficult time climate-wise, ecologically wise, in terms of what was going on around the culture. It was so stressful. And the dean was there, and faculty were there, and things like that. And we had, I walked them through this model. And the dean raised his hand after this model. When I asked them, what comes to mind when you see this? And the dean raised his hand and just in a very vulnerable, honest way, he said, "Holy crap, Kelly, this is what we train in law school. I mean, we train perfectionism in law school." And they had this wonderful conversation about how do we affect culture in working in this. But I loved that honesty of seeing how systemically we create cultures that perpetuate this. Well, what do we do about it? What did people do that disrupted the fear-based model of excellence? And so we became focused on learning from them because they weren't born knowing it. They learned it. And they were very intentional about the work of it. So hopefully what you're seeing now is why the work of flourishing is just that it's work. We don't shy away from at the Contemplative Sciences Center, we don't shy away from the message that this takes work. But we also very quickly say, and you're worth that work. Hopefully now you understand why the work of flourishing is work. But then what do you do about it? And so as we studied what people did about it, we found that there were kind of 5 paradigm shifts that people worked through to kind of think differently, to develop a mindset that was different, that disrupted the fear-based model of excellence. And the first paradigm shift that they did is they trained themselves, they worked to think differently about values, to move from values clarification to a deeper values relationship, from what my values are to how are my values alive in my life. Moving into a different way of thinking about their values, moving into a different way of thinking about self-esteem, that was more based on values expression and management, which got at deeper levels of integrity. And then they developed a very intentional, healthy relationship with fear. We found that people that flourish are not less afraid, they just hold fear well. By developing, they focused on a healthy relationship with values and a healthy relationship with fear. And we talked about training. How do we do that? And then we focused on advanced coping strategies. I'm in a university setting, so we work a lot with young adults, and our research does not bear out the fact that this is a snowflake fragile generation. This is a very resilient generation. However, they are walking into a world that is increasingly absurd. And so we've got to be able to match the coping and advanced coping strategies with the absurdity and the relentlessness that is happening in our world. The relentless pace, the relentless pressure, the relentless noise, and the relentless uncertainty. And then we help them train for flow by moving from a chronically evaluative mindset to an expressive mindset, which is essentially defining my self-worth by the healthy engagement in what matters to me, to where engagement matters most and outcomes are secondary. And that's what we're in, an expressive mindset when we're in flow. And so we became focused on, as we were learning this, can you train it? So I encourage anybody, I'm going to send you a link on the slides to an open educational resource that has all this information that's free and available to everyone, and allows you the opportunity to kind of go into these 5 paradigm shifts in a deeper manner. And I encourage you to use that for yourself as well as those that are colleagues or people that you serve. And I'll give you that link that's open and available to everyone. But we were fascinated by individuals that were in very intense burnout conditions that were able to maintain a certain level of vitality. And what did they do? And we were kind of waiting for these kind of very brilliant strategies that they focused on. We found instead they got very elemental. And they basically focused on 3 things every day, 3 major things every day. They had 3 major intentionalities every day. And then they focused on 3 minor things every day. They had to have the foundational things for the minor things to work. And we call these the essential nourishment for flourishing through chronic too-muchness and the essential seasonings. You've got to have the essential foundation, but the essential seasonings kind of add to the richness and robustness of this work. And so I want to share these with you. And I want to give you a loving challenge. I would love for you to try this every day for the next 8 weeks. It takes less than 5 minutes. It takes less than 5 minutes a day. I want you to try this every day. I want to invite you to try this every day for 8 weeks. And then I want you to call me or text me or write me and tell me what you notice. I'm going to give you my contact information. I'd love for you to tell me what you're observing and what you're noticing through this work. But before we get to these strategies, I need to ask you 2 reflective questions. And I'd actually like you to jot them down. It might only be 1 or 2 words. Just, you're not going to have to share it, but I want it to be reminding you of what your answer was. But I have 2 questions that I would like for you to answer. And to yourself, you don't have to share them. These are very unfair questions, by the way, but you can imagine anything. And I want you to think about the answer, and I want you to write the answer. Especially, don't overthink it. Write down what first comes to mind, but you're able to give some contemplation to it. First question. If you could only be remembered for one thing and one thing only, which is totally unfair because you're going to be remembered for a lot of things. But if you could only be remembered for one thing, what would you want that to be and why? So for instance, when I think of Hethel, the only thing I remember about Hethel is this. What would she hope I would say? So, by the way, this is not a tombstone question. This is not an end of life question. This can be someone that enters your life for a week. And if they leave and can only remember one thing about you, what would you want that to be? So this is not an end of life question. This is a now living question. If you could only be remembered for one thing and one thing only, what would you want that to be? Just jot that down real quickly. Second question. If you could actually be remembered for two things, what would be the second thing you would add to the first? If you could actually be remembered and remembered only for two things, what would be the second thing you'd add to the first and why? Focus as much on the why and jot that down. So I'd like for you to try this exercise. Invite you to try this exercise every day. Takes less than 5 minutes for the next 8 weeks. And then call me and tell me what you notice. The essential nourishment are these three major things. The first thing, start off every day with this question. What opportunities are there for me to practice today the two things that I said I want to be remembered for? And be realistic with your time and energy. What opportunities are there for me to practice today the two things that I said I want to be remembered for? And be realistic with your time and energy. One day you may say, I can just think about these two things for 30 seconds because I've got a lot of other important things to do. But take that 30 seconds. Another day, though, you may say, I could actually step into these two things all day. I could immerse myself into these two things. But start every day with this question. What's the power of this question? Human beings are most naturally motivated by fear and comfort. That's what we're most naturally motivated by. So we tend to kind of start developing a rhythm to our day where we start off every day with what has to be done today, and then how do I seek comfort afterwards, which is fine, but it doesn't lead to flourishing through burnout kind of intense conditions. Instead, if you can start every day with this question becomes very purpose-centered. And by purpose-centered, what this means is the things you want to be remembered for are tied to a deep sense of purpose. And so if I start off every day in a value-centered, purpose-centered mindset, then it not only reminds you of the two things you want to be remembered for, it also opens your mind up to other important values that are important to you. We found that even though fear and comfort are the most natural human motivators, the deepest form of human motivation are your values, but only if you have a healthy relationship with them. This question helps start to develop a healthy relationship with your values. And it starts off your day purpose-centered rather than fear and comfort-centered. Second step, when you step into those two things that you want to be remembered for, no matter how short or long a period of time, do so with complete experiential acceptance. Complete experiential acceptance. In other words, I accept whatever happens. You may want a good outcome, which is fine, but you are going to define your worth and define your success by the engagement in these things rather than the outcome. Both matter. Outcomes matter. The experiences we have from our engagement, that matters. Engagement has to matter more. And our world will pull outcomes and experiences forward every day. We have to be very intentional of starting to redefine our self-worth by the healthy engagement in the things that have purpose to us. And then the outcomes are just the mood of the day. People that flourish in burnout conditions, they feel the outcomes. Like they feel the outcomes of the day. But it's more of a mood rather than a deep sense of self-worth and sense of purpose. It's like if a person that is flourishing through burnout conditions, if they have a day of constant disappointing outcomes and you ask them, how was your day? They'll say, it wasn't a good day. It was kind of a crappy day. This happened, this happened, this happened. But if you ask them if they're okay, they'll say, no, I'm fine. I'm disappointed, but I'm fine because I engaged in what mattered to me. The world just kind of beat me up for it. The important thing is where they go next. They immediately go to healthy self-care. they immediately go to healthy self-care. Whereas most of us, after a day of many outcomes, we get very evaluative. What does this mean? What does it say about my future? What does it say about the world around me? We give great meaning to those outcomes, especially in the fear-based model of excellence, where we're needing reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And so this starts to train your brain to start redefining your sense of self-worth by the healthy engagement of what matters to you. And then the third step, at the end of the day, which this is the most neglected step and the most important step. At the end of the day, take a moment and appreciate and value where you courageously engaged in those two things with no buts allowed. No buts allowed. You can't say, well, I did it for an hour, but I could have done it for two. Well, I did it, but I could have done it so much better. No buts allowed. And take a moment and appreciate and value where you engaged in those two things. What's the power of this step? This basically transforms purpose into meaning. A lot of people think purpose and meaning are the same thing. They're slightly different. Purpose is motivational. Meaning is reflective. So for us to have a meaningful life, we must take a moment and pause and appreciatively reflect on where we engaged and what mattered to us, where we engaged in purpose. We must reflect on that in an appreciative way. This is different than a gratitude journal, by the way. Gratitude journals, I highly recommend them. They're wonderful things. Highly recommend them. But gratitude journals can start to drift into being grateful for things that have happened to me, which is fine. But I also want you to spend time focusing on where you engaged in an appreciative manner, where you engaged courageously in the things that matter most to you. Doesn't have to be a 30-minute self-love fest. It can be while you're brushing your teeth at night. Just take a moment and reflect appreciatively on that. By the way, why do I keep saying the word courageous and courageously stepping in these two things? These three things are hard. They're not complex, but they're very hard to do. And that's actually what courage is. When we step into something that is right for us, that's hard, that's what courage is. Courage is stepping into right hardness. And this is hard. And it's only hard. And I know you are no strangers to hard. And so you're worth that hardness. And it's important that you give it that prominence, that level of priority. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King is he said that heroism is the courage to act every day according to your values, that's heroic. We don't give it that heroic value. And it really is important to do in order to deepen a sense of meaning from our engaged purpose. So, the essential nourishment is starting every day with a purpose-centered mindset, engaging in the day with acceptance that the power of how I'm going to define myself is through engagement, and then taking the time to reflect appreciatively to enhance a sense of meaning. What are the essential seasonings that add to the richness and robustness of this foundational work? Is every day step into something enjoyable. You're never too busy. You can, even if it's for 30 seconds, every day, step into something enjoyable. Every day, step into something healthy. And we're going to talk a little more about this in a minute. Every day, step into something healthy. And every day, this was a surprise to us in our research, every day, step into both giving and receiving encouragement. We found that people that flourished through chronic too-muchness not only gave encouragement, but they set up a support network and were vulnerable enough to receive support. And we found that mattered. It was so interesting, the narrative of these individuals that were in burnout conditions that were still flourishing and had a sense of vitality. Their narrative was they would say, I am exhausted most days, and many days I'm heartbroken. And they said this with complete confidence. It wasn't a platitude. It wasn't a cliche. They said it with complete confidence because they were doing the work. And I'm living a life of meaning. And I'm trying to be healthy in it. That was just enough to move the needle. That was enough to tip the needle toward flourishing. And that's what we're talking about. This doesn't make your life easier. but it helps you engage in that relentlessness, that absurdity in a healthier way. So I want to talk with you a little bit too about healthy self-care. So there's a difference between soothing and self-care, healthy self-care. And I wouldn't know by watching it, but I would know by your intentionality. Because the difference between soothing and healthy self-care is all in the intentionality. With soothing, the intention is to feel better. Like when I am wanting to soothe, my intention is, my purpose is to feel better, which means that at some level, I don't feel good now and I want to feel better, or I want to feel better than I do currently, which actually means my intention starts to shift into changing brain chemistry from feeling bad to feeling good. And there's only 5 things that change brain chemistry really fast. And that's food, drugs, sex, pain, and compelling entertainment. That's it. That's the only thing that changes brain chemistry really fast. Food, drugs, sex, pain, and compelling entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with any of those 5 things, even the pain of exercise or things like that. There's nothing wrong and there's nothing wrong with soothing per se. But when we're going through difficult times, when we're going through chronic too-muchness and absurdity, when we intend to soothe, we tend not to manage them too well. They can get away from us because the intention is to feel better. And my intention is to chase toward changing brain chemistry. And what happens is it starts to become dissociative and escapist and can get away from us. Like I don't even remember eating these 5 cookies. There is nothing wrong with eating 5 cookies, but we want you to savor every single bite of that. I don't even remember these 6 hours of streaming these series of episodes. I went to just go watch one and found myself watching 6. I don't even remember it. It becomes dissociative and escapist. Whereas with healthy self-care, the intention is to be healthy. And so we step into practices with the intention of being healthy. Now, when we step into those things, we might find that we might feel better afterwards, which is fine, but it can't be the intention. It has to be that has to be seen as a bonus, that the intention is to be healthy. And we can do that in all kinds of ways through verbal expression, talking with people that feel safe and trustworthy, through physical expression, be it sedate or vigorous, through creative expression, through meditative expression, be it meditation, mindfulness, prayer. There's all kind of different ways that we can engage in healthy self-care, including taking a temporary break from our stress. And that's where we're not denying the reality of what we're facing. We're just putting it on the shelf for a little bit. That's when I go out with my friends, but I don't talk about it. I'm just putting it on the shelf for a little bit, not denying it, not putting a lid on it, but just putting it on the shelf. That's healthy if we can do that. But one of the things that we found that was really interesting is how people that managed healthy self-care the best is how they approached wellness and how they thought about wellness. And I think y'all have done such a wonderful job of bringing the integrative, multidimensional model of thinking about wellness instead of that binomial model of the absence of disease means I'm well, or I'm either sick or well. It's taking a holistic, multidimensional approach. And I know you use the 6 dimensions of wellness. We happen to use the 8 dimensions of wellness. Both models are absolutely fine. And our 8 dimensions of wellness include these 6, but also add environmental wellness and financial wellness. Because sometimes financial wellness is separate from occupational wellness. And so we kind of separate that out. So you're welcome to add those 2 additional dimensions of financial and environmental if you want to, or you can just use this model. But I want to take you through an exercise, if you don't mind. So if you could get ideally, if you could get 2 pieces of paper or bring up 2 screens, 2 Word document pages on your computer, or use your notes in your phone, on your smartphone. But either way, I want you to play with something. And ideally, it would be, you can either write down the directions to this and do it later, or you can do it now. And if you want to do it now, I would encourage you, I'd like to invite you to get a sheet of paper and get something you can draw with, because I'm going to ask you to draw something. And take just a moment to get that ready. And so on one of those sheets of paper, we found, remember I told you at the beginning of our talk that people that flourish tend to strive for more work-life harmony than work-life balance. Well, we're going to do what's called a wellness harmony exercise. And I want you to think about this in terms of creating your wellness harmony. So I want you to look at I want you to look at these 6 dimensions of wellness. And if you want to add the other 2, that's fine. It's totally up to you. And the other 2 are financial and environmental. But look at these dimensions of wellness. And on one sheet of paper, on the top of that sheet of paper, I want you to label it as my current wellness harmony. So this is going to focus on what is, not what you want it to be, not ideally, but what currently is. So my current wellness harmony. And what I'd like for you to do is, using circles, I would like for you to graphically depict these dimensions of wellness according to 2 things. You have to kind of get your head around this for a second, but y'all have brilliant minds. You can do this really easily. But I want you to graphically depict these dimensions of wellness using circles, using the following 2 criteria. First, depict how much time and energy you are devoting to each one of these dimensions of wellness by the size of a circle. So if I'm devoting a lot of time and energy to this dimension of wellness, then it should be a big circle. If I'm devoting very little time and energy to this dimension of wellness, it should be a really small circle. So time and energy devoted to this dimension of wellness, characterize that by size of circle. The second criteria is, how important is this dimension of wellness to you right now? So in terms of importance, you put the circle based on the place on the paper according to importance. If this is a highly important dimension of wellness, move that circle to the center of the page. If it's a dimension of wellness that's not very important, you move it to the outer edges. So for example, a dimension of wellness that is very important to me right now, I'm devoting a lot of time and energy to it, would be a big circle in the middle of the page. Or you can have something that's very important to me, but I'm not devoting a lot of time and energy to it, and it'd be a small little circle in the center of the page. Or it could be something that I'm devoting a lot of time and energy, but it's becoming less important to me, and that would be a big circle on the outer edge of the page. Also, keep in mind the interdimensionality of the interaction of these dimensions. So if you find that one dimension of wellness, when I devote time and energy in this, it also helps with this other dimension of wellness, then make sure you depict those as interlocking, overlapping circles. Not what you want it to be, what is. My current wellness harmony. Take a minute and depict these 6 dimensions of wellness, or the other 2 if you want to add them, according to how much time and energy you're devoting and how important they are right now. And do they overlap at all? I just checked the chat, and Will, you had a great question. Explain the overlapping part again. It's really about if any of these dimensions of wellness complement each other, to where, like, I find that I devote part of my physical wellness is in this physical activity that involves other people, which also helps with my social wellness. And so those two circles will be overlapping. So to the degree that time and energy you spend in one dimension of wellness helps with other dimensions of wellness, you would have those two circles overlapping to some degree. And if they complement each other a lot, they'd be overlapping a lot, or if a little bit, they'd be overlapping a little bit. I hope that helps.
Dr. Crace.
What is environmental wellness? Thank you, Hethel. Great question. Uh, Actually, what I want you to respect in this is when you think about these dimensions of wellness, I want you to think through your own personal and cultural lens. And in terms of environmental wellness, we found there's a lot of variability as to how people define that. Some people define environmental wellness by their work environment or their living environment. Like when my office is clean and natural and well organized, I work better. I feel healthier to the degree that my environment feels tidy and neat and well structured. Another person may say, when I think of environmental wellness, I think of sustainability. I think about my earth and my connection to earth and the world around me. They think of often climate anxiety, that type of thing. But there are other people that define environmental wellness as kind of a form of a sense of inclusion and connectedness. Like, how is my environment feeling in terms of me feeling affirmed? So it really depends on your own individual notion of what environmental wellness would mean to you. It can mean your the health and wellness of your current environment, your interaction with your world, or just feeling a sense of inclusion and affirmation and acceptance. Great question. Thank you. I hope that's helpful. So I don't want you to overthink this. Just play with it a little bit and know that you can always change it after reflecting. If you're more of an internal processor like me, then I like to spend more time with it over and then I may change it around a little bit. But I think you've got the directions now. Now I want you to bring out the second sheet of paper. And I want you to title that page as My Preferred Wellness Harmony. My Preferred Wellness Harmony. And so what do you want this to look like? And you map this out in the same way. Size of circle is the degree of attention and time you want to devote to it. Importance is where you put it on the page. And any kind of relational things among the dimensions, you have them overlap. What do you want it to look like? Now, this has to be realistic. In other words, you still have only 24 hours in the day. You don't get new energy, you don't get new time. So if you can't just expand all of the circles. If you expand one, you've got to reduce another. So you still have just the same amount of time and energy. So if I expand one, I've got to reduce one. What does that look like? Play with it. Have fun with it. Be compassionate as you're thinking about this. Be realistic. Don't be too judgmental or evaluative. Be analytical. There's a difference between being analytical and evaluative. Analytical is an honest intention to learn. Evaluative is very personal. good, bad, success, failure. Try to be analytical, but not evaluative as you kind of play with this and work with it. So as you play with this, spend a little more time with it as you get time. Use this as a framework too, to kind of, with a lot of the things that you're learning all week with the wellness challenges. You have some amazing people here that are offering really good insights, a lot of wisdom. See how this integrates. If this resonates with you, great. If it doesn't resonate with you, trust your wisdom. Look for something else that does resonate. But if this does resonate with you, what I want you to focus on is a couple of things. Is one, spend a little time after you're done with this thinking about what factors will be helpful in you moving from your current scenario of harmony to your preferred harmony. Like, what factors will help you do that? Supportive, facilitative factors that will move you toward this. This is called, many of you may know this, is called force field analysis. What are the forces that are facilitative of you moving toward your preferred wellness harmony? And what factors might inhibit it? What factors might get in the way? What restraining factors might get in the way of you moving toward your preferred wellness harmony? And spend a little time thinking about that and think about ways, how do I amplify the facilitative forces? And how do I manage the challenging restraining forces that move me toward this? Now, spend a little time thinking about that. Talk with each other about it. Talk with someone. Having a conversation around it helps. But I want you to use this in a different way. So for you, all those of you that kind of cope on this side of perfectionism, this is not your new to-do list to succeed or fail by. This is not your new plan to succeed or fail by. No, this is about brain training. Here's how I want you to use this. I want you to take these things out once a week. So once a week, pull these graphs out. And during that week, I want you to pick one dimension to celebrate because it's healthy. It's not perfect, but it's healthy. One dimension to celebrate and one dimension to nudge. And I really do mean nudge. I'm not talking about moving from a 2 to a 10. I'm talking about what would move this from a 2 to a 2.5. Or it may be even a healthy dimension that's like at around a 7, but you kind of want to move it to a 7.5. But for that week, focus your attention on a dimension. You may be involved in all 6 dimensions, but I want your focus to be on celebrating a dimension that is healthy because it's not passively happening. You're making it healthy. And I want you to celebrate that. And focus on a dimension you want to nudge. And then the next week, you pull this out and you do the same thing. You may choose the same exact 2 dimensions. That's absolutely fine. But look at it as if you've never looked at it before. And pick a dimension to celebrate and a dimension to nudge. And we find that just taking that kind of little bite-sized well-being approach helps you engage in this better than taking this big plan that can sometimes look and feel overwhelming to us. So I look forward to kind of hearing how that goes for you. More importantly, I'm looking forward to hearing from you in 8 weeks of what you notice about this work that you might engage in. I really want to hear from you. I would love to learn from you. Why 8 weeks? For those of you that know neuroscience, you know that with neuroplasticity, it takes about 15 weeks of daily mindful intention on something that we want to be intentional about for neurological change to happen in the brain. It takes about 15 weeks. I want to hear from you halfway through, just to see, what are you observing? What are you noticing? And I think you'll be really, I can't predict because everybody's experience is different, but I've loved listening to those experiences. They're incredible. I think some of the most fascinating ones I have are ones that as they go through it, they start to realize that actually, the more I'm living this, the more I'm finding out what I thought initially I want to be remembered for is starting to shift. That I'm realizing that some of my values are values that I've kind of been taught to value. But when I really get into this deeper level of authenticity, this is really what matters to me. And it just results in this kind of deeper level of authenticity and meaning at this point in time in your life. Um, I also want you to be aware that if you notice on the bottom of this slide, that's the lifevaluesinventory.org is the open educational resource that's free and available to everyone. And one of the central features of that website is the Life Values Inventory, which is free and open to everybody. It's a part of our research. We spent over 2 decades empirically validating an instrument that is not designed to be values assessment of what your values are. It's designed to be a snapshot of what your current relationship is with your values. And the nice thing is it holds your data to where you can come back and take it every year and be able to look and see how my values, how my relationship with my values is evolving. It was interesting. We did this a lot. People that have gone through this program, many of them did this during the pandemic. Many of them were young adults that had taken our course at the university and had gone through the program. And here they were shipped back to their home, living in the room that they grew up in. Old family dynamics were starting to emerge. And what they did is they had everybody in the house take the life values inventory, including multi-generational. They had their parents, their siblings, their grandparents take it, and they sat around and talked about their results and talked about their current relationship with their values. And it was a very equalizing effect. They started to learn about their parents' relationship with their values and how they got there. And their parents started to learn that about them. And it just became this very lovely equalizing thing. We did find that people that flourish at least once a year get away by themselves and ask themselves, what matters to me right now? And how would people know it if I couldn't tell them? And how healthy are these values right now? But they didn't stop there. They would then go and ask the same, they would share their results, their reflections with other people and ask the same of them. And we found it was a very deepening experience that results in this deeper relationship with values. So I really look forward to hearing from you. I'll share these slides as well as they have developed these materials too that will be sending this to you for use with the credit that you can have. But we've got a few minutes for questions, comments. I would love your comments, your wisdom, things that you have found to be helpful that you think would be helpful to others, and any questions that you have that I could be of help with. And I want to invite Hethel to also share your wisdom because I know you have a lot of wisdom in this area. And so want to invite you to share any strategies that you would think would be helpful too.
Dr. Crace, I can tell you from looking at the chat that we've got so much positive feedback about this presentation. So definitely want to thank you. And as you know, since we met, we've kept you very busy. And I think you might need to be opening up more time in your calendar in the future. So informative, insightful. The content really has resonated with a lot of people.
Oh, I'm glad.
I thought of a question that I thought the
Please.
audience might find helpful. So, from an organizational standpoint, if there are partners, supervisors that are listening, what can kind of firms do to support employees?
Oh, that's a great question, Hethel. And I know you do a lot of work in this area too. So I invite your comments with this. We've been doing a lot of work on organizational flourishing. In fact, that's our most recent book that came out not too long ago about our organizational flourishing, about how we bring this into a system and culture. A couple of things that we found is that we found that one of the things that really helps is most organizations will do values work from kind of a top-down vertical perspective. And often the culture will kind of take on the values of the leader. And then we'll say, these are the values that we go with. Or they focus a lot on a mission and values and vision statement from a collective standpoint. But what happens with a lot of that is people with social capital or emotional power will often dominate that kind of conversation. What we've been working on is more of a horizontal way of collectivist understanding of values and how we have that. In fact, on that open educational resource, we have a feature now that allows people, allows teams, intact teams, where individuals can go in and do the life values inventory and get their values. So they have their profile that they can work with, but it drops it into a secure and private portal where the team can get an immediate aggregate of everybody's individual values and how that forms as a collective. So they get an aggregate so they can start to see that with our staff right now, at this time in our life, these are the values at an individual level that are starting to form an aggregate. And so they start to see the values that as an organizational aggregate, these are our high priority values that give us great purpose and meaning and they're motivational. Here are some values that are causing us strain because we're feeling more the stress of them than the joy. And here are some values that we're under attending to. And it gives the team a great portal of narrative discussion about how to create a culture that allows us to express these values. And then the second thing that we do is once they learn that, we then as a team help them understand what do these organizational values look like when they're healthy? And what do they look like when they're unhealthy? And where are we right now in that continuum? And so flourishing organizations continually return to that. They continually, okay, here are our top 5 values based on our individual collective aggregate. Um, what does that look like when it's healthy? And what does it look like when it drifts into unhealthy expression? And how do we manage that better? And we found that really helps move us into kind of a greater sense of resilience. And I'd love for you to add any things that you found working with organizations,
I
especially
was
in this field.
I was going to say, what a wonderful tool for team building. That sounds fantastic. We have several questions that have come through the chat. If you don't mind, I wanted to ask you about some suggestions for resources that can help people work on dimensions that were identified. For example, if there was someone that maybe they identified the spiritual well-being as an area that they wanted to be in the center. Do you have any specific resources? Where could a person start if they identify that?
Yeah, there are so many really good institutes out there that are around wellness, the National Wellness Institute, a lot of institutions and universities are devoting a lot of time and attention to that. So first, um, if there's a university near you, I would I would reach out and see what resources are there around integrative wellness because many universities now are creating their integrative wellness centers. And many of the old student health centers are now converting into holistic integrative wellness centers. And they have a lot of wonderful resources that focus on the multiple dimensions of wellness. So reaching out to local universities, also just doing a really good search of integrative wellness, multiple dimensions of wellness. You'll find a wealth of resources that will allow you to go into each dimension as it relates to how that helps me. The Virginia Bar Association, I think, does a really nice job of pulling out those dimensions of wellness and thinking about it through a legal profession lens. So I'd really reach out to the resources that VJ Lab, that Virginia Bar Association holds and because y'all do such wonderful work with that and kind of make it really specific to the profession. So I think there's a wealth of resources out there.
Great, thank you. Can you talk about the brain and body connection during this 15-week process? What is going on with the brain and body? Do you find that people that undergo this process transform? Any success stories that you can share?
Yeah, it is that's, I don't want to lead it too much, but that's what I'm interested in hearing is what are you noticing in these multiple dimensions of thinking of mind, body, spirit, thinking of embodied living around a holistic way of thinking that as you are moving your brain into a mindset of focus, that when we think about contemplation, we essentially think of contemplation as giving greater attention, greater intention, and greater reflection on the things that sustain and enhance our lives. And so as you're doing this work, as you try this every day, I am really interested in noticing, what do you notice physically? What do you notice in terms of a mind, body, spirit connection? What are you aware of? And it is really interesting. Some of the things that we've heard are just so moving. But one of the things that I find is that it's often a lot like physical fitness in terms of, because this is mental fitness training. This is what this is mental fitness training. And just like physical fitness training, once you start that process, I want to be physically fit. Once we start that process, if I devote time and energy to that every day, I won't really feel very different. In fact, I'll feel worse for a little while, but I won't feel a lot of difference day to day. And then all of a sudden, after a few weeks, I notice a shift. I notice like feeling a little stronger or feeling a little more fit or feeling a little more well. And then I'll notice I feel well, I feel fit. And if I achieve that goal and then stop, okay, I'm fit now. Now I can stop. Very quickly, I will become unfit. We find that to be the case with mental fitness, is that you may not, when you first start this, not see anything that's obvious to you. But over time, you'll start to notice subtly, I'm responding to the world a little differently. I'm reacting to the world a little differently. I'm noticing my self-talk is a little different. And this work is so important because I say this with all love and intention. We as a cohort, and especially in this field, because my brother was a lawyer and I've worked around this field for a long time. Um, you are a very compassionate group toward others. You kind of suck at self-compassion. You are the harshest on yourself. You say things to yourself you would never say to another person. And so it's about, how do we find this sense of self-compassion? And self-compassion does not mean complacency. It doesn't mean giving yourself an out. In fact, people that flourish are highly self-accountable because they're not threatened by it. It's about learning and gaining this sense of curiosity and wonder around this. And so I'm really interested in seeing what you notice. But what most people describe is just a deeper level of authenticity and a deeper level of fitness in terms of how they're responding to the world, to others, and to themselves.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question. I was just wondering if you have ever looked at or are aware of studies of purpose, intentionality of people with disabilities.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, a lot of our research included issues related to adaptation based on multiple levels of ability and ability impairment through either trauma, like we've worked with a lot of military with traumatic brain injury. We've worked with issues of accessibility around the neurodiversity continuum and along multiple levels of abilities and of differential abilities. And what we found is purpose and meaning are an inherent part of the healthy adaptability of an individual. Whether it is something that an individual has managed their entire life, or whether this is something that they are managing from something that occurred that now requires the rest of their life being adaptable to. That level of we learn that the human mind has a limitless ability to adapt. Usually, the finish line that we say we can't cross over into that is usually of our making, not what really is truly our threshold. And we learn that through examples of like the pandemic. We had limitless abilities to adapt if we work with ourselves. And we found that the work around purpose and meaning and integrative wellness, the work around flourishing, really helped individuals manage a situation that was traumatically impactful or life or plan altering, to where it was so significant that it was life altering or plan altering. And we found that was really important. In fact, for many people in our research, that was actually the catalyst to them learning flourishing. when we learned kind of what people that flourished through absurdity did, what they thought about, we often ask them, how did you learn that? Like, how did you gain that paradigm shift? Many of them often reported an unwanted life experience that was plan altering or life altering. And that's why this work is so important, is that we don't have to wait for that. Sometimes we have no control over where that happens to us, but for many of us, we use those really deep experiences to jolt us into this work. The good thing is, because of what we've learned from these wonderful people, we don't have to wait for that. We can step into this work now.
Absolutely. Next question. What was the open access education website that was mentioned? Somebody would like to share that with a non-lawyer.
Yeah, please. You can share that with anyone. And it'll be a part of the slides and a part of the information you'll receive, but it's lifevaluesinventory.org. It's all one word, lifevaluesinventory.org. What it does is it takes you through a process of values assessment that's a little different than how we normally think of values, but then it moves you into videos and articles that kind of take you deeper into this flourishing work that you can return to as much as you want.
Wonderful. And then Dr. Crace, I understand you have a book. This is not a question, but I know that you are also an author. You have a lot of other tools. I know that some of it is in your materials. Is there anything that you want to kind of share additionally about the book that you wrote?
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you, Hethel. We do have a couple of books. One is more for the individual, the Authentic Excellence Initiative around flourishing in a relentless world, which is more for individuals. And then we have the Flourishing for Organizations. That is a part of our second book. We're working on a book right now that is about parenting adult children. We've gotten a lot of interest from individuals that are parenting 20 somethings and 30 somethings and want guidance on how do we help facilitate flourishing among our young adults? And so that's something we're currently working on. But I also don't want people to buy our book because they are a part of academic press, and the academic publishers, as you all know, charge a lot for books. And almost all of the content that we have in our book is on our website that you can access free. So I would encourage you to start there first. Some people really like just the physical reading of a book, which is absolutely fine, but you don't have to. It's digitally available.
Okay, wonderful. And if anyone, would like additional resources about well-being or a presentation, I'm going to leave my email in the chat also, but please contact the VBA, contact VJ Lab. You can contact me. We can help you coordinate something at your firm, your bar association. The VBA definitely will have some ongoing wellness related programming in the future. So please be on the lookout for that. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Attendees will receive an email. I know that Sunny has put some materials already, but look out for an email from register@vba.org with any communications and CLE form. If you don't receive it, please feel free to reach out to register@vba.org. We do have a few more minutes left. Let me see if there's any other questions that came through. Dr. Crace, I feel like
Please, Kelly. Please, Kelly.
I feel like we could have a 3 hour presentation and there still would be so much to unpack.
Well, it's just a human thing. I mean, we're all in this. I mean, we're all in it, and it is something. You know, every time I do this presentation, I take away something for myself that I want to be reminded of, and so it's just it's fully human. And so we're all in this fully absurd world of relentlessness. So we're all together as humans and we're all in it together. And so we found that you can't flourish passively and you can't flourish alone. We really need to be able to do this work together. And I just can't say enough how much I respect VJ Lap and VBA of being able to provide so many resources that really help a profession that is constantly stressed and constantly strained. One of the things that I will mention that we do here at the university is we never use the term stress reduction because stress is a function of caring. So we actually want our students stressed because we want them engaged in things that matter to them. And the only reason it's stressful is because of the uncertainty around it. So we use the term stress management, which I've heard you use the term a lot, Hethel, stress management. And and so we want them engaged in things that matter to them. We just want them to hold that stress in a healthy way. And the Contemplative Sciences Center is really devoted to doing that, is deepening an individual's sense of purpose, of meaning, of authenticity, and giving them the tools to help them do so in a healthy manner. So I also want to invite anybody, any groups that would like to come here and go through a retreat or go through a day-long retreat around this work. We would love to support you and support you in this work in any way we can.
Well, don't be surprised if you have a lot of people that reach out for additional resources and presentations. So
We would love that. We would love that.
thank you so much, Dr. Grace. I could listen to you for days. So,
As
and
I could you.
each and every time I learn something new. So
Oh, good. Thank you, Ethel. I appreciate it. As always, it's great collaborating with you. I appreciate the opportunity and also my
likewise.
thanks to Sunny and Charlene for that opportunity as well.
Thank you. And if anyone has any additional questions or any ideas for programming, please reach out. My email is hchala@vacourts.gov if you have any additional comments, questions, need resources. And of course, VJ Lab, confidential, anonymous. Go to www.vjlab.org to contact them. But thank you again so much.
Thanks, Ethel. Take care. Be well. I wish all of you well.